Following the president's announcement that the U.S. would take a 10% stake in Intel, Kentucky Republican Senator Rand Paul called the move a step towards socialism. Senator Paul joins us this morning to talk industrial policy and more. We've had this ongoing conversation all this morning, Senator, about, we've said the good versus the perfect, and we've said, there are things that the true conservatives like about the president's policies, things that they don't like. If I had to sum it up, you're not a big fan of tariffs or what you would call industrial policy.
Well, it's not that people in government, bureaucrats, are necessarily stupid or incompetent, but it's a debatable question. But they don't get the same signals. So the reason why you don't want your government to own anything, if possible, or to only get involved with those things that the private market can't, is that the private market sends a constant barrage of signals. And people have to respond to those every day. It's sort of a cruel world, the economy is. But that's how we get efficiency, and that's how we get cheap prices for people on different products, is because people are forced. They don't do it out of benevolence. They do it out of this fierce competition as a marketplace. Once you involve government in it, you take that away you take those forces away that breed excellence. And so I think it's a big mistake to have government ownership of things. And of course, it's a step towards socialism. What is worrisome is when you see the people supporting the president just sort of saying, oh, no, this is good, and it is good that the government should own. And that really worries me, because I worry that the free market movement, the movement that was a big part of the Republican Party, is being diminished over time.
I know exactly what you're saying, and just to tell you how I've sort of tried to grapple with it, the money was already going to Intel from the CHIPS Act, and free market forces did cause some hollowing out of a lot of our industries, and there are some that it would be in our best interest if we could bring some of them back. So the CHIPS Act was one way of doing it, but it was just subsidies with all these conditions. Once we already earmarked all that money for Intel, isn't it better if the government actually had a stake, and not a stake where they'd be active owners, but just passive owners? The taxpayers or the government owns the stake, but instead of just giving it to them, as long as they have child care and DEI, actually have a stake. If we ended it right here and it wasn't a slippery slope to owning 10% of every company, is there any way that's okay?
We've been giving poor people Coca-Cola for a long time, and maybe 10% of the money Coca-Cola gets is given to them. Maybe poor people should own part of Coca-Cola. No, it's a terrible idea. It's sort of compounding one bad idea with another. Okay, we gave them the subsidies. Well, let's rescind that. Let's stop that. Let's repeal the CHIPS Act. President Trump, as a candidate, wanted to repeal the CHIPS Act. He was an opponent of it. Most of the conservative Republicans were opponent of it. So, it's always a mistake to say, well, we have this one bad policy. All right, we'll tolerate a little socialism, but we don't want any more. 10% is not too bad, but 15%, you get to 15%, then I'm going back to being for the free market again. Now, I think it's a bad idea.
I wanted you to come on in July, and I told you, and this was after you once again renewed a criminal referral for Anthony Fauci. This is something I've been talking about a lot, because I saw the smoking gun of him trying to get his colleagues to all say there's no way this was a lab-generated virus, and there's a very good reason for him to have done that after he knew full well that the United States had funded some gain of function research, and it was walking and quacking, and it had web feet, and everybody knew, and that was. I think that deserves who cares what I think? But what are the chances that he's held to account someday at this point?
A big question is the auto pen, whether auto pen pardons are constitutional or legal or lawful. We do know that when President Obama first signed a law by auto pen, when he came back from his trip to India, he quickly did sign it in person to make sure it was seen as being legitimate. So I think there is some question there. I can tell you that we are pouring through millions of bits of data on Anthony Fauci. There will be a subpoena in short fashion, and there also will be news in the next week or two about things that we have found from poring over the records. There's going to be significant revelation about Anthony Fauci in the next week.
Okay. What do you make of the new of RFK Jr. and some of the new rules and some of the new developments we've seen with vaccine? That's what I think one of the the downfalls of vilifying Anthony Fauci too much is that it plays into some of the, some of the people that are total anti-vaxxers, which I don't know if that's, there's somewhere in the middle, isn't there, in the way we conduct policy?
Well, I'm not anti-vaccine, but what I would say is the same way there's a Trump derangement syndrome, there's a Kennedy derangement syndrome. There are some very specific issues we should discuss and where I think the facts are on Kennedy's side. Should we mandate vaccines for 6-month-olds for COVID? So we have to ask, what are the risks and what are the benefits? Are any kids dying from COVID currently? I think no healthy kids are dying. And in fact, if you go back through the entire pandemic, about 200 people in the entire country of 350 million people in America, about 200 under 18 died. Virtually everyone had a serious disease also. Virtually no healthy children died. When they did the studies on this, they could not prove that it reduced death or hospitalization because so few people under 18 were going to the hospital or dying that they couldn't prove a benefit. In Germany, they looked at every child under 18 and they had no deaths among healthy children. And so in Europe, they quit promoting this. I think the age is 12 and above in Europe. So these are really honest debates. And I think the extremists are the people on the side of every vaccine is good all the time, the more the better. We don't have to prove risk and benefit. We do know that under 18, really under age 25, there's a risk of myocarditis, presents with chest pain and elevated cardiac isoenzymes, like a heart attack. It's not a heart attack, but this happens in about 6 out of 10,000. That's a small number from the COVID vaccine, but what is the chance of death? It's smaller than that. So you should be presented with these facts and given an alternative. If the CDC says it should be 6 months, many states just get lockstep and they put it into their school program, and essentially it becomes a mandate because it's hard to go to school anywhere. Even if private schools follow this. So I'm against the mandates, and I think Kennedy makes a good point.